Ella and Greg had just moved into their first house together. It wasn't much, a fixer-upper in a quiet neighborhood, but it was theirs. As a housewarming gift to themselves, they bought a brand new top-of-the-line smart TV. The moment it was unboxed, the TV was unusual. Its sleek black frame seemed to absorb light, and the screen, even when off, had an eerie depth to it. While setting it up, Greg found an old slip of paper taped to the back. The handwriting was shaky and uneven, as though the writer had been in a rush. Rules for use. Never leave the TV on past 3 a.m. Do not mute the sound, no matter what you hear. If static appears on the screen, turn it off immediately and do not look at the screen. Never under any circumstances watch Channel 00. Ella chuckled. Creepy rules for a TV. Looks like someone was trying to prank us. Probably an old factory worker's joke, Greg shrugged, crumpling the note and tossing it aside. At first, the TV worked perfectly. It had crystal-clear picture quality, streaming services, and even a voice command feature that Greg loved showing off. But strange things started happening. One night, while binge-watching their favorite series, the screen flickered. For a split second, static replaced the show. It was faint, but Greg swore he saw a shadow move across the screen. Ella told him he was imagining things. Later that week, the TV turned on by itself at 3 a.m. Ella woke up to find the living room bathed in pale light. She thought Greg had fallen asleep watching something, but when she entered the room, the TV was tuned to static. She turned it off and returned to bed, trying to ignore the gnawing unease in her stomach. The next night, things escalated. They were watching a movie when the audio began to warp. The cheerful soundtrack twisted into a low, guttural growl that sent chills down Ella's spine. Greg grabbed the remote and instinctively muted it. The moment he did, a faint whispering began, coming from the speakers themselves. It was like dozens of voices, all speaking at once. Their words were incomprehensible. "Unmute it!" Ella screamed. Greg fumbled with the remote, and as soon as the sound returned, the whispering stopped. By now, they were terrified. They searched online for any information about the TV, but found nothing. The brand wasn't even listed on the manufacturer's website. It was as though the TV didn't exist. Then came the night of the rule they'd both dreaded, Channel 00. It was late, almost 2:45 a.m., and Greg had fallen asleep on the couch while Ella dozed beside him. Without warning, the TV powered on. The screen glowed faintly and a low hum filled the room. Ella stirred awake and shook Greg. "Turn it off," she whispered. But the remote wouldn't respond. The buttons on the TV were unresponsive too. Suddenly, the screen flashed, and an unfamiliar menu appeared. At the top, a single option glowed, Channel Duras. "No," Ella whispered, her voice trembling. "We can't." Greg's hand hovered over the remote. "Maybe if we just check it out for a second." "No," Ella snapped. "Did you not read the—" Before she could finish, his thumb pressed the button. The screen turned black. The hum grew louder, vibrating through their bones. Slowly, an image began to emerge, a live feed of their living room. It showed Ella and Greg sitting on the couch, staring at the TV. "That's impossible," Greg stammered, standing up and waving his hand in front of the screen. But the Greg in the feed didn't move. He stayed seated, staring blankly ahead. Then the figures in the feed began to change. Their skin paled, and their features twisted. Ella's doppelganger turned toward the camera, her eyes hollow and her smile grotesquely wide. "Turn it off!" Ella screamed, scrambling for the power cord. The screen flashed again. This time, the image showed the couple lying on the couch, but now they were lifeless. Their bodies were twisted at unnatural angles, and their faces frozen in terror. "What is this?" Greg shouted. A voice crackled through the speakers. It was low and distorted, like metal grinding on metal. "Payment due. Channel 00 collects." Suddenly, hands shot out of the screen. Pale, skeletal hands grabbed Greg and pulled him toward the TV. Ella screamed and tried to pull him back, but it was like the TV itself was consuming him. The screen rippled as his body disappeared inside it. "Ella, run!" Greg's voice echoed, distorted and distant. Before she could move, the hands reached for her too. She felt them wrap around her wrists, icy and unrelenting. With a final, blood-curdling scream, Ella was pulled into the TV. The living room fell silent, the TV screen now dark and lifeless. The next morning, the house was eerily quiet. The TV sat in the living room, its screen reflecting the empty room. Neighbors noticed the absence of Ella and Greg, but assumed they had gone on a trip. Days turned into weeks, and the house remained empty. The TV, however, would occasionally turn on by itself, showing static. The rules for use were forgotten, crumpled in a corner, as the TV waited for its next victims. One evening, a new family moved in. They were excited about their new home and quickly noticed the sleek TV. The father found the crumpled note and laughed, thinking it was a joke. He tossed it aside and began setting up the TV. As the screen flickered to life, the family gathered around, unaware of the sinister history. The TV's screen glowed faintly, and the low hum returned, signaling the beginning of another haunting. The first night, the TV turned on by itself at 3 a.m. The father woke up to find the living room bathed in pale light. He thought one of the kids had left it on, but when he entered the room, the TV was tuned to static. He turned it off and returned to bed, dismissing it as a glitch. The next night, the audio began to warp, and the whispers returned, echoing through the house. The family grew increasingly uneasy as the TV's behavior became more erratic. They searched for answers but found nothing. One night, the TV powered on, and the unfamiliar menu appeared with channel 00 glowing at the top. The father hesitated but pressed the button. The screen turned black and the hum grew louder. An image of their living room appeared, showing the family staring at the TV. The cycle of terror had begun anew.